Hello, I'm Barbara Beeden, and I'll be conducting an interview for the Pacific Coast Air Museum Oral History Program and the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. This interview is being conducted at Windsor, California on July 12, 2011. I'll be interviewing Carol J. Stevens, who goes by CJ, currently a member of the museum. CJ was born on October 29, 1940, in San Luis Obispo, California. He served in the Vietnam War and achieved the rank of lieutenant colonel. CJ will be sharing some of his personal story and history with aviation and the military today. So CJ, why don't you start with where you were born and if you lived there for a while and how you got interested in aviation. So where were you born?
Well, I was born actually in Arroyo Grande, we lived between Arroyo Grande and San Luis Obispo in Southern California, on a ranch there, and stayed there until I was mid-grade school, then moved to Northern California.
Did your parents influence your interest in aviation? Or?
No, actually neither of my parents flew. I had an aunt that flew airplanes, but oddly my older brother and I became quite interested in flying. And someone asked me once where my first memory of becoming interested in, and I can remember on the ranch at age 5 and 6 taking my dad's tools out and flattening tin cans out to make a piece of metal which I was going to construct an airplane out of. So it was kind of on my mind at that point, pretty early on. And once we moved to Northern California, then we were able to get to the airport on our bicycles fairly frequently. And in those days, here at the Sonoma County Airport, we don't have all the security precautions that we have today. So young people like myself could actually get to the airport and get up close to an airplane and talk to the pilots and develop an interest, which is totally impossible in today's standards.
Yeah, that's for sure. Did you have any siblings?
I had 2 brothers. My older brother was probably even more interested in flying than I was, and he got killed in an airplane in 1960 actually, when he was 20 years old. The same day that Francis Gary Powers got shot down, oddly enough. But he was a charter pilot, and he ran into a mountain, so that ended that. But we were very interested in flying all of our teenage years. When I was 15, we worked all summer. I was a logger, and at the end of the summer, each of us saved $200. 3 of us, a friend of mine and my brother, and we bought an airplane. So I didn't have a car yet, but I had an airplane.
That's good. What kind of plane was it?
It was a J2 Piper Cub, 40-horse Cub, and so we were logging hours, we said, instead of miles. It didn't go very fast, but we were putting hours in our logbook.
I understand a Piper is one of the planes that's easier to learn on than some others.
Well, it was highly used as a trainer. There were several primary trainers back in those days, and I mean, if you can buy an airplane for $600, it sounds pretty cheap, but $600 was a little more then than it is now, but it still wasn't a lot of money. It was all I earned in the summer. But
yeah.
So we kept it for a year and a half and then sold it for $600.
And how that was when you were a teenager? And
right, living right here in Santa Rosa. We'd moved here, I think, when I was 10 years old, and developed there as a member of Civil Air Patrol. It was a good youth organization for aviation, and was really active in that, and some search and rescue stuff around. It was at that time the Civil Air Patrol was operating out of the old Navy base off of Sebastopol Road, and that field closed down. Eventually, it moved here to the Sonoma County Airport, but I was an active member in that until I went in the Air Force in 1960.
Mm-hmm. And did your brother go on into the Air Force or into the service also?
No, I had the younger brother, never was in the military, and the older one got killed before he had one eye, so he could never have gone in the military anyway, so as it turned out.
Okay. And what do you remember most about your early experience with flying?
Well, there was a lot less rules than there are now. That's one of the things I remember, which actually made flying a lot more pleasant, and you're free to go more places in your airplane and with less restrictions and fewer people judging how you operated. But we were active in any sort of flying we could get. When my older brother was 18, he started a glider school here at Sonoma County Airport, and we operated that for about 2 years. I was since I worked for nothing, I was a pretty available tow pilot, so we ran a glider school for quite a while out of here.
Wow. That's pretty fun, actually.
Yeah, we got started pretty early. My parents, I guess, were called permissive. To own an airplane, you have to be doing that kind of thing still in high school. Why? It was pretty good venture, pretty good opportunities, really.
They must have known that you could handle it.
I'm not too sure they weren't trying to get rid of us.
So did you receive any specialized training or?
Well, as you know, you try to get your private license, which I did when I was in high school, and went on to get a commercial license, and not long after that got an instructor's license, and that's a pretty good way to build time and learn a lot about flying. And so, like some professions, you're always learning, and it's a pretty technical information intensive operation flying airplanes. So you're really always learning. You never really stop. Some of it's specialized, and I went to junior college for about almost 2 years out of high school. They ran out of easy courses, so I had to give up on that, and I went in the Air Force as a cadet to start a military career.
Very good. So what do you remember about serving in the military? Did you start out, I assume, with boot camp?
Well, it's a little bit different. What they call a cadet training, they don't have it anymore. And it's sort of a 1 year long boot camp, if you want to look at it like that, but it also incorporated flying training. Because I didn't have a college degree, they just shut down the program where you could go in as a cadet pilot. And they stopped that 6 months before I was available to go. And so I had to go in to get my commission. Since I didn't have a college degree, I went in as a cadet, got my navigator wings and my commission at the same time after about 11 months of training.
And was it, as opposed to most boot camp experiences, was it a lot easier?
Well, it was actually quite intense. Cadet training for a year is like the Air Force Academy cadets, only we didn't have the university level of education with it. We had the flying training and the cadet training and military training, but I mean, it was eat square meals, which means don't look at anything, and a lot of marching, a lot of boot camp type training as part of the military training, along with the flying training, and so we came out there with our navigator wings and as a second lieutenant commissioned officer. So it's a good way to get started. It took a year, but pretty intensive training. But in all, you came out there with a job and a career ahead of you if you were able to pursue it.
Mm-hmm. And what was the timing between that and the Vietnam War? Well,
from there, as a navigator, I knew I didn't want to be a navigator. Other than that was the only way I'd get to be a pilot. So it seemed like that was the shortest way to get there. I knew from the time I was about 16 years old that I was going to go on and try to get into Air Force pilot training. So it was really a long-term goal. So out of cadet training, I knew I didn't want to get entrenched in the navigator's business because I didn't want to stay as a navigator. I didn't want to get where I was unable to get away from it. Mm-hmm. So they offered this opportunity to go to bombardier training. So I moved to Sacramento and went through about 8 or 9 months of electronic training and bombardier training. So I got another set of wings, the bombardier wings, and out of that I was still looking to hide so I didn't get stuck. And so when the opportunities came down for the assignments, there was an airplane called a B-57 on there, a Canberra, and I asked all the instructors what it was, and nobody knew what it was. I said, well, that's what I want then, because I didn't want to go in the mainstream of anything. And So I did that. I went to Albuquerque in the B-57 Canberra, and our primary business was air sampling. They called it, it was under the command of Air Weather Service, but we would chase nuclear debris around the world. It was just at the end of the time of the era when the United States could do atmospheric sampling and testing of nuclear explosive devices. And so that was our business, is sampling the Russians' nuclear bombs and our own. So we would wait off the downwind side of Russia when they would test one. We'd wait in Alaska, and we would sample the debris when it came out. We would also set off our own. That's when the Atomic Energy Commission was setting off our own atomic bombs, and then we'd go fly around in them and take samples from that. I had the dubious distinction of being the second one to fly in the largest bomb ever set off in the continental United States. I entered the cloud at 45 minutes and after detonation, and it was a 100,000-ton bomb. So
Wow.
it was interesting work. And I did that for a couple of years until I was finally able to try to get out of the navigator business. But
So were you exposed to radiation?
yeah, some radiation. That's right. Yeah, there was some exposure to it.
You don't glow in the dark, though.
They say I don't glow in the dark. That's correct.
So, okay, so you've talked about what kinds of planes you flew. What was your first combat mission?
Well, oddly enough, to kind of connect the dots, as I left the Air Weather Service business, or the nuclear sampling business, I was declared surplus because the commander was trying to get me to pilot training also. So he kind of declared me as an overage personnel. Well, of course, they picked up on that and transferred me to Europe as a navigator. And once you do that, you're stuck for 3 years in Europe. So that was kind of a continuation of where I didn't want to go, but turned out to be extremely interesting business. That mission was in photographic reconnaissance, and there I initially had 2 years in RB-66, which was a Douglas destroyer type aircraft, and I did that as well as I could, but I also was trying to go to pilot training still, and there was an opportunity to go get back into the B-57 Canberra Long Wing, which was, it's on the photograph that's around here somewhere, but it's a huge high altitude airplane. They only built a few of them. It was highly secret stuff, but we were in Europe doing the peacetime reconnaissance missions at the time, which was photographic reconnaissance of the Soviet bloc's airspace. And so in Europe, during peacetime, I got a combat air medal, which was, at that time, was not released to the public, really. So it was credited as a combat mission, even though it was not a time of declared combat. It was the Cold War syndrome at the time.
What 3 years was that?
That was between, I left there in 1967, and then I was finally got the opportunity to go to pilot training. So I met my 10-year goal when I finally arrived there with pilot training ahead of me. And I looked forward to so much, and I went into it with the idea, and as everybody told me, don't tell them you know anything about flying, even though at that time I had about 1,000 hours of pilot training, flying time. But you don't ever want to get an attitude where they're going to try to prove that you don't know anything. So I went with a lot of humility and a lot of good advice and a lot of great experience behind me. And I decided I was going to try as hard as I could to finish as high as I could in the class, because I knew it was competitive, and the highest graduating grades got their first choice out of all the assignments. So it was well worth working for. It was a real incentive. And I had a couple of young children at that time. I have 2 boys, and we moved back to the States from Germany, and we didn't even have a television in the house for the first 10 months of pilot training, because I didn't want to be distracted in studying. We hadn't seen television for quite a while, and so that distraction. So I worked as hard as I could, and as long as I could finish first, I was going to pursue that goal. Well, it worked out. I did finish first out of about 700, I guess, and won a lot of trophies and awards, which were very rewarding to myself, and also gave me the opportunity to take the first assignment, the most desirable assignment out of all those choices. Of all the 10 bases, there was about 700 airplanes to choose from, and I got the first choice. They only had 3 front seat F4 assignments, and and that was the first time it had ever been offered to graduating pilots, and so I was able to take the first one of those, which it really leads to your question of when was my combat, because I knew at that time the Vietnam War had been going on for a number of years. This was 1968, so it had been going on for about 3 or 4 years, or probably longer, depending on where you start counting. And so I knew exactly what my assignment was going to be, and so I wanted to go in a nice airplane, and I got that opportunity to go through the F4 training and then go straight to Vietnam. So that would have been in the summer of '68 when I got to go in the front seat of a very nice airplane, the F4. So it was a good connection for me. I did not want to go over there as a navigator in someone else's hands, because if the pilot kills himself, you're in the same airplane, you get the same result. So so anyway, I was pretty happy to go in that airplane.
So when was it that you got married and had your children?
Well, you weren't allowed to be married as a cadet, so I didn't get married. I was going with a gal I met right out of high school, and so she waited until a week after I graduated from cadet training. So I was married right then, and the children followed a few years later. But so I was married when I went to Vietnam, and stayed married.
Well, good.
Yeah, I didn't follow some examples, but anyway.
So, are there 1 or 2 combat missions that you especially recall?
Well, I can recall most of them.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it was very interesting to me. I mean, war is a pretty stupid thing to do, but if someone was going to have a war, I was happy to go fight it. I had no problem with it. I loved the flying. I mean, I'd finally reached my lifetime goal of flying around in a jet airplane. It's exhilarating. It's challenging. It's nothing but excitement from the time you get up, and it was a great way to live. And so, but at the same time, some missions were pretty dull. You're just flying around, and there wasn't a lot of threat unless you were in the target areas, particularly. So a lot of missions were just kind of dull. But of the 232 missions I flew, I can remember probably pretty well 100 of them as how they went into detail, and because they burn into your brain very, very quickly. It's.
Is there one that really stands out?
Oh yeah. Yeah, on my second tour when I was flying out of Thailand, again, I was still in the F4, and I'd had a pretty good experience. I probably had a couple hundred missions already, so I felt very comfortable in the event. But the details of the event were sort of a short but interesting story. That particular day we were met with every possible defense that they had at the time. We had MiGs that flew through the flight and tried to break us up. We had 10 surface-to-air missiles that went through the flight and tried to excite us a little bit. And as soon as they went away, then the ground fire started, and then we nearly ran nose-to-nose with another flight right over the target area, and just missed a great midair of 8 airplanes running together, and tens of thousands of rounds being fired at you when you're in the position to drop the bombs, and then the escape without running into everybody. And it was a very exciting time. And I learned on that particular flight the difference between being scared and being really scared was if you got to peel your tongue off the roof of your mouth with a spatula, that means you're really scared. and that was the only time that really gets you to that level of excitement. And when you're looking at your life expectancy in the couple second of area while you know that things are going about as exciting as you want them to get. At the same time, you're doing what you're trained to do. I was comfortable doing it. I knew how to do it the best I could, and I was with a unit, the 49th TAC Fighter Wing, that was very well trained, and we went over there with 4 squadrons, which is roughly 100 airplanes, and we never lost a man, and we flew 10,000 missions in 6 months, and never lost an individual. And then, and to say the converse of that, a similar unit, I was on my first tour over there, with a much lower level of threat, we would lose about a plane a week, and we would lose about half the crews. So, completely different training program, completely different operation, and it shows what what can be done to improve the combat loss, really. To be able to go and fly that many missions and be that well trained that you actually are able to avoid all the hazards and come and bring everybody back. We lost a couple of airplanes, but that happens.
Yeah, that's a good result. So are you still in touch with any of the people that you served with?
Oh yeah, a number of good friends I see each year up at the Reno Air Races that I go there. All pilots kind of eventually show up there, and I've rendezvoused with a lot of them, a lot of good memories, and there's a special bond between people that you've been in combat with.
Yeah. Well, so that was a pretty nice segue to Reno Air Races and things that you're involved with now. After you were out of the military and you're back in Santa Rosa, tell us about the Air Museum and how you were influential in starting that.
Well, yeah, it kind of rolls right into that. My partner in the airplane that I bought when I was 15 had a parallel career, but when the day I went in the military, he went to work for the airlines, and he flew originally with Pan Am, but he had an airline career, which keeps him closer to home here, and he can develop more of a career hobby that way. So he was one of the first air races. Lloyd Hamilton was his name, and he found a Hawker Sea Fury in Australia. He purchased it and imported it into the United States, and was in the first air races that started up at Reno in about 1965, I believe they started. So he was already doing air racing while I was still in the Air Force. Of course, I was very jealous of that type of flying because it's exciting. It's what fighter pilots like to do. And here he was doing it even though he was an airline pilot, and he got quite good at it and was well known. And so when I retired and came back to Santa Rosa, he was getting his second airplane ready which was a special race plane, but it was the same kind of a Sea Fury. And I'd been around a couple of years here, and one day he asked me if I wanted to fly the second one once he got it up and going, and it sounded like a good idea to me. So I started flying that, and with my background being flying at speeds and altitudes and formation and such like that, it was a natural event for me to jump into. And so we got into that, and a number of people around Santa Rosa, Lynn Hunt, and had an old Warbird, and maybe half a dozen people were getting these airplanes going up and running with no organization. They were just individually doing that. And so at various cocktail parties or ice chests, I imagine the conversation came up about starting a museum. I mean, they were primarily looking for, besides the museum aspect, they were looking for tax incentives as far as a flying museum to where they could get some sort of an ownership, tax, partnership, and the various ideas were being spawned. So it occurred to a few of us that maybe a museum was the right thing to do. And so we met at my house one day to discuss this and say how this thing would look. And I think all the original members are still in the museum, that are still alive anyway. And so we started this museum with the intent of being a flying museum. That's why the IL-14 actually was flown in, one of the very nice airplanes you got. As it turns out, there's really not it was very difficult to develop an actual flying museum. I mean, you can get the airplanes and get a lot of nice airplanes, but the finances of making a viable, safe, well-trained museum that flies, we found eventually that was just next to impossible to get to where you could function, because the cost of maintenance and training and the fuel costs and the liabilities and all the problems that come to have a flying museum, it just made it where it wasn't going to work. But so we started collecting airplanes along the way, and members, and the membership grew, and so it started to develop, but the flying aspect of it dropped away. And so even though a few of them have tried to fly over the 25 years probably now the museum's been in existence, the flying part just kind of never can happen. And we're up to 700 members or something like that right now, and I've been fairly inactive in recent years. I went off and did other things, but so both the air racing helped to spawn the museum, and the museum helped spawn air racing. So they kind of feed on each other there. But so that's kind of how I got in one and the other.
Mm-hmm. So you said earlier that the first meeting was held in your house?
Right. Yeah.
That makes you pretty foundational.
Well, yeah, that was kind of a foundation, and we went on for a couple of years before, and we got quite a few members, around 100 or so, and we decided an air show would be the thing to do. And our first air show, I think it was, we had up on Nob Hill there, was a non-flying show, and it was all the static airplanes that we could generate to make it a reasonable show, and some advertising. I think our total budget was less than $10,000, quite different from today. But I believe it was the first one. It was held in April, and it rained. It was April. We never get rain around here. It was going to be great weather, and of course it rained, so the crowd was almost nothing. Well, now we had whatever money we had out, which wasn't much, but it was a lot of our budget, and so we had to have a second one that year in August to help pay for the first one. So I think that was the year we had 2 air shows. And the second one, the weather was great, and it was a success, and we paid all the bills I think we ran up from the first one. So so anyway, we had a lot of hard workers, a lot of good volunteers, and that's what makes the whole thing work.
So how many years of that type of air show was there?
They did several non-flying, and then they made the big jump to a flying air show. And by then we had some real dynamos that were willing to spend a lot of hours putting together all the difficult parts of running an air show and getting it together. And I'm a pretty negative guy at this point. I'm saying it's never going to work. And they had a lot of money out. I don't know how much anymore, but I mean, I'm thinking, man, that much money out for advertising, and you got insurance and all these things, and way deep in debt. What if the people don't show up? Was sort of my go on it. And you know, fortunately, I lost all the arguments, and so the people that were right won, and we had successful air shows after that. I think each year it's been at least a break even and runs the budget, and it's really grown, and it's something to be proud of.
Yeah. I think we bring in about 25,000 people.
Yeah, it's a great show, and one of the best little shows. You know, Reno is the biggest little city in the world, or something like this. It's kind of the best little airport air show in the West Coast. You know, there's a couple that are pretty big and pretty good, but ours has always been a great show. The people that put it together do a great job. Yeah. And I take no credit. They're all hardworking people.
So who else was involved with you in the early museum?
Well, about everybody at the airport, I guess. You know, there's people that come out that just fly their own airplane and fly it away, but there's the people that come out on the weekends to work on the planes and stuff, and just about everybody with an aviation interest got involved at some point, especially anybody that had an antique or an airplane. And there's benefits, some antique to show your airplane, get some tax benefits, and so those people stay pretty interested because it benefits them a little bit financially. But specifically, just about everybody around the airport, you know, Larry Rengsdorf and Jim Gardner, Lloyd Hamilton, Steve Penning, and the list goes on. There's a number of them.
How many people were you at the first meeting at your house?
4.
4.
There was 4 members at the first meeting. And we had, I think, another one at my house a month or so after that, and then we started having somewhere else, and then we were at the base of the tower. There's an office down there. We could have it in a small office. We had like a dozen people, and then it was grow each time, get bigger and bigger. It was amazing. It always, people would always come out, and time to do some work. They would always get a pretty good turnout for work parties and stuff. So, yeah, these things that run with volunteers, it takes a cheerleader, and at the time, I think Lynn Hunt and Steve Penning were the big cheerleaders that motivated the volunteers to come out and get stuff done. So that was pretty big.
Well, I know that Lynn gives you a lot of credit for motivating him.
Oh, really? Okay, well, that's good. I must have bought him a beer or something along the way.
So what kinds of activities, how did you guys get the first plane in the museum?
Well, if it wasn't the first airplane, it was very near the first. The IL-14 was available from, it was up at Reno, and it was a flyable airplane, and for around, I think $3,000 or $4,000, I'm not sure, we purchased it, and they went over, the mechanics went over and got it in flying shape and actually flew it over the mountains and landed here, and that was its only flight since we've owned it. It had to stay on the ground for a couple of years for some reason, I think, and then we could fly it, but at that time, the flying incentive was pretty low. Soon after that, or about that time, the old F-8 on 19th Avenue that was down next to the Shriners Hospital forever, down there on the playground, the kids used to climb all over it. The Navy needed, well, it had some leaded paint in it, they discovered, And since the Navy didn't want to deal with the leaded paint, they want to get rid of the leaded paint and get rid of the airplane and get it out of their hair. And so we had some subgroup in the organization that said that they would get rid of the paint and clean it up and make it a museum piece. And we went down with some trailers and dragged it home, and it had about a ton of concrete and poured in the bottom of it to make it stationary. And they got home and they chipped the concrete out of it, and they bondoed all the holes and took the paint off of it and did the proper thing with that and painted it up. And you walk by, you'd think it could fly, but you wouldn't want to get it very high up in the air. It's just a showpiece. And so I think that was probably our second airplane that we had. And so then we started obtaining them, and we had some connections with some people in the Navy that, as they became available through the Navy sources, we had our name pretty high up on the list through some good connections there. And we obtained some very nice airplanes from the Navy, some of which they flew in for us and delivered them very nicely. And of course, they're non-flyers, and then they flew them in and took the engines out of it and put some old engines in them, or took all the black boxes out and stuff like that. So it was a pretty good opportunity to get some great airplanes that basically for the effort of doing them. And then being connected with Holly's Paint and stuff was good, because they all needed a coat of paint when they got here usually, and so some crews would get out there and get the sandpaper going and clean them up, and the painting crew would come out and paint them up, and they looked as good as any other museum. So it's been just a gradual growing and better. It was interesting because in the beginning, Dave Andrews, the airport manager then, was very much against the museum, and he figured we're going to be about a year or two, we're all going to walk away, and he's going to have some junk airplanes out there he has to get rid of. And so I'm glad to say that his fortune telling there didn't come true at all. Each year it's gotten bigger and better, and all we need is a better site to put them on. It's we've been negotiating for various sites over the years. I ran a committee for a year or so trying to find a better site and work out the details of that. So we've done some studies on that, but it's hard to put together that big of a financial investment. It'll get there, I think, eventually, and when it does, it's going to be unstoppable as far as the growth of the airport.
Great. So how do you feel your experiences with aviation have influenced your life or changed your life?
Well, they have been my life. I mean, all my life, that's really it's centered around the airport. It was an intense interest of mine that grew as I got more experience, as I got better at what I did, and as you get better at what you do, you're more interested in it. So it's self-feeding in that regard. And like anything, that if you're into photography, the more you do it, the better you get, and the better you get, the more you do it, and the more you like it. So in that regard, I was extremely fortunate to get the opportunities to, that, like I said, when I wanted to buy an airplane as a teenager, my parents didn't say no. So those kind of fortunate things come along, but there was no speed bump that stopped me from doing it. And 10 years of knocking on the door, I finally got an Air Force pilot training. But it was a goal I had. I wouldn't accept no as an answer until I turned 26, and then I was no longer eligible. And I made it just before I turned 26. And so the flying has just been such a big part of it, as a career. The people I know all are at the airport, so because they're there, I'm there. So it's still a big part of I built my own airplanes. I still fly them today, and it's everything.
Yeah, that was my next question. So you're still flying today?
Yes, yeah.
What do you fly now?
Well, right now I've got a Glacier 3, which I built in 2.5 years, and one of the better things I did. It's a great airplane. It flies great, and I'm glad I built it. And I was going to wait till I retired from my job. I had a corporate flying job here in Santa Rosa, but then I realized that at some point you get old enough and you can't move well enough and your eyes don't work well enough that build an airplane when you're young enough to enjoy it and still have it when you're later. So I have this. It's a great airplane.
So tell us some more about the Reno Air Races and who you do that with and what it's like.
Well, I was really, there again, fortunate. I came back to town, and Lloyd Hamilton was racing his airplane, asked me if I wanted to race his. So He had two of them, so over about 14 years, I was at the races each year with his and flew it almost every year. I think I may have missed a year when one airplane wasn't working. He always wanted to fly it, so I guess it was his. It was okay. And it was it ran in the middle of the speeds. It wasn't the fastest ones there, but it wasn't the slowest one either.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, let me get a little bit of water.
Okay.
You don't mind?
Getting dry.
So after doing that for about 14 years, then Lloyd sold the airplane back to a fellow in England, had it restored and sent back over there. So I was kind of without a ride. Art Vance had a Mustang that he let me fly off and on some years, and some years a lot of flights and some years a few flights in it. But I was happy to fly that. A Mustang's a great airplane to fly. And then the people over at Ione asked if I wanted to fly Argonaut, which is that's another Sea Fury with a bigger motor on it, and that's a Class A ride. It's a beautiful airplane, well restored, bigger motor, goes faster, and I flew that for 4 years. So a total of about 26 years of racing up there. When the Reno authorities, the administration of the Reno Air Race Society up there, decided that a better training was required. They wanted to start a school called Rookie School or Pylon Racing School, and so I got involved with that and was one of the initial instructors and stayed with it until just recently, teaching the new people on how to go racing and stuff like that. So that was kind of a more involvement in the air racing. Again, it's teaching, it's operating performance airplanes at the maximum of their capacities, and that's what I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
Along the way, the Cafe Foundation, a local nonprofit organization that's a research aircraft aviation research organization, I'd say, is local. It's very small, only a dozen or so members right now, and I was with them for 12 or 14 years probably as their test pilot, and did a lot of testing of airplanes out here at Santa Rosa. I'm going to end up coughing here. Can you cut that out, or is that a safe part of it? Excuse me.
Sure.
So I was basically their only test pilot for a number of years, and we would do flight testing on all the designs of the home build, because the home builds were showing up on the market with really no testing other than the designer flew it a few times and off it would go to the market. So National Experimental Aircraft Association was worried about all these airplanes out there with really no design, nobody checking on the design, is this a good design or not? So we were sort of commissioned to do that and evaluate these airplanes, and in the archives back there are our reports. We would do a CD and we'd do the magazine, about a 12-page article in their national magazine. So on the types of airplanes and the good parts of them, the bad parts of them, and what we found it made is the manufacturers a lot more honest about their performance, because they were stretching them a lot for sales, as anyone would, until we would start to write the article and say, well, this is what it really does, because we were unbiased and not driven by the company. So we got into a lot of different things for research testing. That was a side little test, like the question, does an airplane go faster if it's just been waxed or not, and answer some of these questions. We were able to measure performance extremely accurately, and so we had a lot of off-the-wall testing that we would report to Experimental National, and they'd report in their magazine. Some of the testing got into the stage we needed to remove the propeller and fly an airplane without the propeller on it, and so I got the opportunity to do that, and that was a lot of fun. So I did 7 flights with a propeller off the airplane, and we'd tow it to altitude. And it was with the approval of FAA. Took us a couple of years to get approval, but we answered all their questions to their satisfaction, and actually did a lot of flying with no propeller, which people find is rather unusual.
Yeah, I would say so. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, we were looking at the glide performance of airplanes and engine out performances, and so we had to do this test to prove absolutely our data was right. And after we finished the series of, I think, 3 flights or 4 flights here out of Sonoma County Airport, at the very first crack of dawn, So there was no heat in the Earth that influenced our results. And the data wasn't coming up exactly like they expected it, and it was still just off a couple of percentage points. And so they decided we need to do it over the ocean. And so we went up to Little River and took the propeller off up there and worked all night to get it ready to launch with the test gear on it, and went out, towed it out to sea. We were about 6 miles offshore at 12,000 feet when I turned loose of the tow plane and did the test data points in the descent, and it got down to about 3,000 feet. I had to give up and head back to the airport, which we knew how far away that was, and so it was very still there. And I called in to made the normal radio call that I was going to land at this airport, and there was like suddenly 3 airplanes that were in the traffic pattern. And so I asked, I transmitted, would it be okay if I had priority? I said, I don't have an engine. Of course, they all gave me opportunity to land. So I landed, and they got towed back to the toolbox where we're downloading the computer, and these 2 nice ladies come over and say, oh, when we heard you didn't have an engine, we started praying for you. And I turned around and looked, I said, I don't even have a propeller. At which time they just threw up their hands and left. So anyway.
Well, that's very nice that they were so concerned.
Yes.
So, backing up a little bit, I don't remember, did I ask you if either of your sons became pilots?
You didn't ask, but no, neither one of them. I pushed a little bit, but not too hard, and they were in this rebellious state that they weren't going to do anything their dad did. So until much later, when they were about 40, they asked if I'd give them flying lessons. I said, nope. You had your opportunity when you were 15.
Uh-huh. But now you work with, or not work with, you play with some of the other members of the museum and some of the younger people that are now flying up at Reno, and you work with them, or did you?
Yeah. I still go to Reno and fly there. Oh, I'm not flying this year. I still fly with them. I still train them. Some of them come here and fly in and want more training for different things. And so another fellow and I here locally, happy to teach what we can, to share what we've learned along the way. And that's how we learn it. Someone passed it on to us. And so there's a lot of that at this level of flying when you're doing stuff like racing and some high-level formation. Mm-hmm. You can't learn it from books. Most people don't understand it or know it. So you've got to go find who does know it and learn it from them, and hopefully they'll pass it on down the line. And so I was given a lot of opportunities when I was young, and it served me well, and so I feel obligated to pass this on to others.
Mm-hmm. So you're currently still flying on a regular basis, just for fun?
I fly my own airplane right now. I've got a medical thing that I'm working with, but that's about all. I flew professionally till this last winter. And then I finally gave up the corporate job. And they look up in the cockpit and see how old you are. You start wondering, they want to see your birth certificate, or they're going to get back off,
Yeah.
So I haven't scared too many people, but at some point you got to recognize that is an issue.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other thoughts or stories or concerns or anything about the museum or your military background that you want to share with us that we maybe overlooked?
Well, no, I think my concern or my hope for the museum is that they get a permanent site that's suitable, that someone steps up with a good answer. In some of the counties, like San Diego Museum, which is a well-established and old museum, I think the county gives them their site for $1 a year. And it would think somebody in this county could give us a break. I think we're paying full price or maybe above retail for the site we got out there. And so it really cuts into the budget when you got to pay so much for rent from the county, when it really does a great service to the county. They spend money on parks and other facilities for the public, yet they charge this nonprofit whose use is for the public, they charge them money for existing. So it doesn't seem to be a level field there. And I would hope that some of the financial wizards in the county and the private people can come together and find a solution that works for a long-term permanent site, so that the museum can grow even better than it has with more space. And it's such a good thing. It struggled in the early years because it was so small you couldn't get recognition. But right now we've got people driving through the state that come out of their way to come see it. I mean, that shows you really the power of it, when it's registered in the museum logs and stuff. And so it should continue to grow as a viable and good public service event.
Very good. I think that's a good place to end, except for one thing. So does an airplane go faster when it's just been waxed?
Yeah, 2.5 miles an hour. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, CJ. I really
Certainly.
appreciate you taking this time to share
It was my
your
pleasure.
life with us.
My
And
pleasure.